Welcome everyone, and glad you're joining us this evening. We have our presentation tonight is brought to you by the Fallbrook Climate Action Team. We have a website, which is www.fallbrookclimateactionteam.org. And we are a group of citizen volunteers just concerned about climate change. So we bring you topics on the last Tuesday of every month on a different speaker, different topic, something concerned about climate change. And tonight we have Dave Rosenfeld, and he is the executive director of the Solar Rights Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization or association, I should say, of California solar users, and talking to us about some of the push and pull that goes on between solar users, consumers, and the CPUC and the utility companies, and the back and forth that if you are a solar user or are thinking of becoming a solar user is certainly something we all want to be aware of. So with that, Dave, if you have any other introduction you'd like to say about yourself, please feel free, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Terry and everybody else, for being here and for all the work that you do to defend Mother Earth. I am going to just jump right in to share my screen, and I'm going to just go over the fight to defend rooftop solar, where we stand. I am going to, and let me just say, well, actually, let me share my screen first, and then I'll just do an overview. I'm going to do a presentation, and then we'll do questions. Does that seem right? And you can interrupt at some point if we're veering off in a direction that you don't want. All right. Maybe just get like a thumbs up, just so that I know that people can see this first slide. Great. Okay. So I guess just by way of background, the Solar Rights Alliance, as Terry said, we are the nonprofit association of California solar users. I'm the director. And we are one of about 600 nonprofits and cities and schools that are a part of the Save California Solar campaign that I'm going to tell you about. Our particular organization, the one I run, is the Association of Solar Users. The coalition that we built is a lot of different angles. It includes environmental organizations, climate change groups, desert defenders, equity organizations, the Black Church, immigrant rights groups. And so one thing we've just, learned we relearned, I suppose, because we knew this, is that rooftop solar, there's a lot of people that have a stake in the outcome of this fight. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on. Part of what I'm going to do, besides saying just what's going on, what's on the table, what's the threat, is to talk a little bit about what the utilities say, because many of you probably are hearing that and might have some questions. So I want to just anticipate that and address some of it, and we can address some of it in the questions if it's still out there. And then obviously just what our game plan is. Forget that, that was from a previous presentation. Just one other thing about the Solar Rights Alliance is for those of you who have solar or are thinking about getting it, we're about 100,000 solar users. I'm the one and only paid staff person. Our board is other solar users from around the state. I'm not going to play these videos, but if you come to our website, you can actually just see videos of some of our members and get a sense of just what they're about. I invite you to sign up. It's free to join. We do ask for donations through the year, but you don't need to give in order to be able to be a member. We just want you to be a part of the whole thing. And it's very much a volunteer-driven group like yours. And so that's one thing I love, just is volunteer. I think that's what makes the world go around. So you all should be damn proud of yourselves. Okay, so I want to start with the utilities, because they have had a long history of opposing rooftop solar. And then I'll back into just why rooftop solar is so important. Back in 2000, long before, in the olden days, like 15 years ago, there wasn't very much rooftop solar, and you had to be quite wealthy or quite technical in order to get rooftop solar. And today, you don't have to be either. There's over 1.4 million solar rooftops in operation. Just under half of all new solar is going into middle and working class neighborhoods. The counties in California that have the highest solar adoptions per capita also happen to be the poorest counties in the state. And all you have to do is take a drive through Fresno, a working class neighborhood in Fresno, to see that. Solar is going up on multifamily homes, apartment buildings. Affordable housing developers really like solar. It drives down the cost of rent that they charge to their clients. It allows them to build more units. So while solar still largely is in the hands of homeowners, and homeowners tend to skew wealthier, the trend line is clear. And it's been a real success story in California. And we're just getting started. There's over 40 million people in this state. There's millions and millions of ratepayers. Rooftop solar is on track, and battery storage is on track to be something like cars and TVs and cell phones. And that's exactly what it should be like. And what the utilities are trying to do at every step of the way is trying to crush the trend before it jumps to the next level. And they come up with a different story each time. The story is bunk. They invent it in a strategy room, and then they go find, they basically pay off academics and consultants and then ultimately politicians to make their claims seem true, but they're not. And I'm going to get into that. So back in 2000, they just said solar is unreliable. The sun doesn't shine all the time. The technology is never going to be ready for prime time. That was their story in 2000. By 2005, the technology was really, 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 really good. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor, was on the cusp of doing a really, really big initiative. So they said, solar's too expensive. It's always going to be too expensive. You guys are out of your minds. It's going to be fossil fuels now and forever. We should just try to make them cleaner and do carbon capture. Well, by 2013, the price of solar had gone from $40 a watt to like $4 or $5 a watt, and consumers were starting to snatch up solar in droves. So then their story was that solar is causing a death spiral. Everyone is defecting from the grid. There's going to be no customers left. And the ones that have it, it's going to be unsustainable. We're going to go bankrupt. We're too big to fail. This whole thing is a mess. Well, by the time we rolled around to today, and PG&E's CEO walked away with a $55 million paycheck and record profits year over year, they've come up with their latest story, which is solar is hurting poor people. That we are responsible for increasing electricity bills on the people that can't afford solar. It's nonsense. The rooftop solar, the bottom line is it's a threat to utility monopolies and profits. And to understand that, it's good to understand, well, what is the cause of rising utility bills? And so the way to understand this is long distance power lines, the same ones that sparked all the fires, the same ones that go down and then cause rolling blackouts, long distance power lines. And the reason why that's really what it's about is because that's how utilities make their money. They don't really make the money selling you the electricity from the power plants so much. They do make some money on that, but not what you would think. The way they make their money is they get a guaranteed profit, guaranteed by the government, of between 5 and 10% for every dollar that they spend building and maintaining long distance power lines. And so their incentive is to build and maintain more long distance power lines. That's what it's all about. And we're paying dearly for that incentive, because they have now, for the decade or more, they have gone to the regulators over and over again, proposing gigantic, massive spending projects. The regulators, because they're captured by the utilities, have approved it year after year after year. And so here we are in 2020 alone, and we're working to get new data. Ratepayers paid $4 billion for the long distance power lines. That's a 38% increase over 2016, 66% increase over 2016 for PG&E, and then another $5 billion in wildfire mitigation costs because these power lines are really unsafe. And that's how they make their profit. So it's not a shock that between 2010 and 2019, the utilities charged ratepayers $20 billion in costs for building and maintaining long distance power lines and collected about $20 billion in profits over a similar time period. It's not an exact correlation, but that's what's going on. Now, there's some things that actually reduce the need for long distance power lines. One of them happens to be rooftop solar. Ratepayers benefit from that. but utilities lose profits. And so a couple of data points. In 2018 alone, the state canceled $2.6 billion in long distance power line projects, saying that it was because of rooftop solar and energy efficiency, which are similar things, because you're, in this case, when you're energy efficient, you just use less energy. So you use those long distance power lines less. When you make your own energy at home or at your business or at your school or at your farm or at your church, whatever, you use those power lines less. And some of the most detailed energy modeling that has ever been done projects that over the next 30 years, if rooftop solar and battery storage continues to grow, California ratepayers could save $4 billion a year, $120 billion total, or about $300 per ratepayer per year. That's over a scenario where we, over the next 30 years, we only rely on long distance energy powered by long distance power lines. So rooftop solar actually reduces the cost of the grid and saves all ratepayers money, whether or not they have solar. So the utility's goal is to slow down or stop the growth of rooftop solar and battery storage by making it too expensive for working and middle class people, essentially trying to take it out of the hands of the working class, just as the working class is starting to get the solar. And that's what they want to do. They want to stop it from getting to the next order of magnitude. So they've been lobbying the CPUC. And I should stop for a second. I'm talking to a group that's really, really focused on climate change. And I should just say one thing that just as another piece of backdrop, which is, let me just go back one. The state itself, the different agency than the Public Utilities Commission, the Energy Commission, and also the Air Resources Board, says that in order to meet California's clean energy and climate change and decarbonization goals, we're going to need to triple the amount of rooftop solar that we have today. And we're going to have to increase the amount of battery storage we have by a factor of 8, both large scale and small scale battery. That's not the only thing we need to do. We need to also double and triple and more than that, large solar farms and wind farms. There's a lot of decarbonization that has to happen, electric cars, induction stoves, heat pumps, but rooftop solar is a key part of it. And one thing is that we can't get it all from long distance power. There's enough land, but not all of it can be developed. Land siting gets incrementally harder over time. And then as we've talked about, it comes with a lot of downsides with long distance power lines. We're going to need a lot of long distance energy, but the state itself says we're also going to need to triple rooftop solar. So this is an existential threat to the state's climate change goals. If the rooftop solar market collapses, then California's clean energy progress collapses too. And there's more to that than even just that, but on the basic thing, we need to 3x rooftop solar. And if the utilities get their way, we're not even going to get close to that. So let's talk about what's been on the table. So the utilities have been lobbying the Public Utilities Commission to make changes to a policy that's called net metering. Net metering is simply the mechanism that solar users, when they make their own solar energy, for those of you who don't have solar, you use most of that energy at home. It powers your fridge, it does all the things. But sometimes you make more energy than you're using at that very moment. And when that happens, at that very moment, the extra energy just flows out the wires, spins your meter backwards, goes into your neighborhood, and then the utility sells your power, that power that you supplied, to your neighbors at whatever the rate is during that time of day, and then credits you on your utility bill that same rate. So it's a wash for the utilities. You paid for the solar installation, you paid to make that energy, you pay for the wires through all kinds of other fees and costs and things that everybody pays for. You send it out, the utility sells it to your neighbor, gives you a credit, it's all good. That's what net metering is. It's a billing mechanism that very efficiently allows solar users to plug their extra solar into the grid. And it's really, really key. And it's one big reason why rooftop solar is getting into the hands of the middle and the working class. Well, what the utilities have been lobbying the CPUC to do is to gut that policy. And it's been a year-long effort that started actually back in 2020. But in December 2021, the Public Utilities Commission issued a proposed decision that capped off a year of lobbying from the utilities and others. And it was almost everything that what the utilities asked for. It was a $700 a year solar tax on average, depending on the average size system, just for putting solar panels on your roof. It would be an 80% cut to that credit I just told you about for sharing that extra energy with the grid. This would apply immediately to anyone who's getting solar going forward. And then for anyone that already has solar, it would take effect within 15 years of the time that your solar was switched on, which is a reduction in the protections that existing solar users currently get. It's been a long-standing principle that when you get solar, you can stay on your net metering plan for 20 years. And why 20 years? Because that's how long a solar system is warranted for. What the CPUC was proposing was essentially to roll that back by about 5 years. So this would have basically doubled the cost of going solar, and it would have made it nearly impossible for your average person to be able to get the solar. And that's what the CPUC proposed in December 2021. Fortunately, there's a lot of people that really care about rooftop solar. I think FCAT is a part of this coalition. You must have signed a letter at some point down the road. So I want to thank you for raising your voice, adding your name. This is just a selection of the 600 nonprofits and cities and schools that spoke out against the CPUC's proposed decision. It's really tremendous. But it was more than that. Over 150,000 members of the public have submitted a written comment, an official public comment to the CPUC and also Governor Newsom. And almost every major newspaper in this state has come down on our side. They've called this a utility profit grab, not in the interests of Californians. And then I can't even now count how many things we have organized. A 30-foot long message in the sand on the shores of the Huntington Beach shortly after the oil spill, saying, "Governor, solar, not oil." Thousands of people marching in the streets of Los Angeles and San Francisco. Some of you may have attended those rallies in January. Thousands of people jamming Governor Newsom's phone lines. We ran ads. We don't have a lot of money, but we still were able to cobble enough money together to run ads on TV and on radio, all the things. And the governor has really been saying nothing, but in January, everything started coming to a head. And some reporters, the governor was giving a press conference in late January, and the reporters started asking him about this. And he said, "We still have some work to do. I think some changes need to be made." I think changes need to be made, is what he said. And it's just so interesting how powerful the governor is. He didn't say anything else other than that. And shortly after that, the CPUC walked back their proposal and went back and basically put it on indefinite hold. This never happens. That thing was on track to be voted on and rubber stamped on January 27th. And instead, they issued a cryptic press release that said the proposal is on hold indefinitely. And that just gives you a sense of just how powerful governors are and also how effective the grassroots backlash had been. I want to just say one thing while you're just kind of looking at this timeline, and this is outdated at this point, of just all the stuff that went into it. The point where I knew that something was happening that was really good here was, I think it was sometime in February, the New York Times has been doing some focus groups of different kinds of Americans on different issues. And around February, maybe it was March, they did a focus group of economically insecure Americans from all over the country, people that really are just struggling to make ends meet and are really affected by inflation. And one of the people in that focus group is a woman named Phyllis from San Diego. And the interview has nothing to do with solar, right? It's about all the things that are going on regarding kind of just being economically shaky right now in this country at this moment. And they get to inflation. And most people are talking about the price of chicken and bread and gas and, just all the things you talk about when you're talking about inflation and how that's hurting your wallet. And Phyllis, this woman from San Diego, starts talking about her utility bill. She's SDG&E, how it's literally like doubled in recent. And then she goes on to say, and now I just heard that they're going after the people who get the solar. You just can't win. And that was an example of just how this issue, even for people that don't have it, because maybe it's not quite within reach yet, maybe they're a renter or something like that, they see what this is about. This is about utilities treating the public like a cash machine, treating the environment like a sewer, having enormous amounts of power, and doing whatever it takes to keep all of us in their control. And that's what happened. And that was the public backlash that allowed us to be able to get derail the solar tax. And I went into some of this already, but just to say, it turns out we've done some polling. Taxing solar is really unpopular with California voters. It's growing in every part of the state and is growing fastest in middle and working class neighborhoods. And some of the counties that are adopting solar are tend to be the ones that are the most low income. Rooftop solar supports good jobs and small businesses. There's almost 70,000 local jobs that are on the line here if the market collapses. If you've met a solar worker, you know these are local jobs. They can't get outsourced. These are pathways to the middle class. It's one of the best ways with battery storage. Solar is the best way to protect ourselves from blackouts. People are starting to understand that and realizing that the state has no plan except to keep us hooked on long distance power lines. And when those power lines go out, we're out. And whereas local solar and batteries is the way to go. I already mentioned we need a lot more solar to meet our clean energy goals, so I won't repeat that, but this is the trajectory. This is the current pace. If we just let solar continue to grow and, this is where we need to go. This is where we're currently going. And then this is where we're going to flatline. This is where we're going to flatline, right here, if we kill the market. So we're going to, if the CPUC follows through with something with what they're doing, we're going to stay here. This is where the market is currently going, and this is where we need to go. And so that's just to give you a sense of just how the stakes are high with respect to our clean energy goals. Rooftop solar deploys quickly. Consumers are installing rooftop solar at the rate of 1 gas plant a month, just the equivalent of capacity. That's a lot of clean energy that's getting on the grid. And like I said, solar saves everyone money. I will also say that equity actually means making solar affordable for everybody. So the utilities try to claim that solar is bad for equity because of this fake argument that we've talked about. Our view is let's get everyone solar. And that's why we're working with environmental justice groups and equity groups to move the needle. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So did the CPUC get the message? There's a lot of reason for concern that they have not. In the month of March, we noted there were numerous examples of high-ranking CPUC officials who made very public statements that were just literally repeating utility propaganda. This gentleman on the left, Chris Wessling, posted on a former state assemblywoman's website about solar. She is a big solar supporter, Lori Saldana, and she was just posting about this issue. And then he gets on, he's literally advising CPUC officials and then says, Lori, you've got it all wrong. Rooftop solar is really going to be terrible. It's inequitable. It causes rates to go up. It was just the whole package of utility propaganda. Even worse is Simon Baker is one of the most high-ranking staff at the CPUC that advises to commissioners. And in several hearings in the legislature, he repeated utility propaganda. I'm going to play you this short video, and someone should just go thumbs down if you can't hear the sound, and then I'll just cut bait and we'll move on. So let me just give this a try. Whoops. That was not what I wanted to do. Let's try this again.
Distributed rooftop solar is more expensive than the utility scale alternative. And so to the extent that there is a cost differential there, there's a subsidy there. And so then how do we wind that down?
I've got these videos that we can send as a package. So if you miss some of it, we've got more, and we've got also longer versions of this where I unpack some of this stuff. But Simon Baker is one of the most important staff people there. And here he is in the legislature basically saying large scale wind and solar farms are cheaper than rooftop solar. But that's a utility lie that ignores the massive cost of those long distance power lines. They just ignore that cost altogether. So there's a lot of cause for concern that the CPUC did not get the message. And then on top of that, on May 9th, the CPUC announced it wasn't a proposal, but they announced that they are still considering a solar tax, a different kind of solar tax than the one that they announced in December. And in fact, it's a little bit even more pernicious, but it's the same basic idea. And it would have been about $300 to $600 per year just to put solar panels on your roof. And they announced on May 9th that they're still considering very, very deep cuts to the net metering credit. And their latest idea is to do it, but just wait 4 years to do it. You'd still send the market off a cliff, but you would just do it in 4 years, and somehow that's different. The second version of the solar tax that they announced on May 9th is particularly pernicious. They call it an innocuous name called non-bypassable charges. But what it would be is they would actually measure the solar energy that you make and consume at home. And then they would assess a tax on top of that. It would be the equivalent of taxing someone for hang drying your clothing rather than running the electric dryer, because they're effectively saying we're going to measure the electricity that you are not buying from the utility because you're doing something else, and then we're going to tax you on it. And it flies in the face of like every principle of ecology that I think we've all grown up to believe to be the case. You tax things you don't want people to do, not things you want people to do. I should just also say, in case anyone's paying attention, would a smaller solar tax make a difference? The answer is no. In Nevada, we know this because in Nevada, they did exactly what the CPUC's second round of proposals was suggesting: a smaller solar tax and also deep cuts to the net metering credit. And what this chart shows you is residential solar adoption in Nevada. And this is going back to I can't see it on my screen, but I think it says 2015. And I always forget if it's 2015 or 2016. But in any event, solar is booming, booming, booming. And then this is when the California Utilities Commission thing went into effect and the market just collapsed right here. Tens of thousands of people were laid off. And then it was right here, the public backlash got so severe that the governor basically instructed the Public Utilities Commission to reverse, and then the industry started to rebuild again. So this was the period where solar tax and deep cuts to the net metering credit were in effect in Nevada. So we know this. So this is not anything that we have to figure out. The public has been pushing back on the second version of the CPUC solar tax really, really hard. Many of you might have participated in the Don't Tax the Sun rallies that we just did earlier this month. If you didn't, I just want to show you this quick video from at the CPUC in San Francisco. There were 1,000 people lined up outside the door of the CPUC building to testify to the commission. And I just think it's really cool. So I want you to just see it. This is a drone shot of all the people lined up outside. So this is the entrance, and then they're just out the door around the corner. And this is the rally that we did in Los Angeles, where people, actually did selfies, video testimony to give to the CPUC. And then just last Tuesday on the solstice day, we wanted 897 phone calls to go to the governor representing 1 minute, a call for every minute of the day on the longest day of the year. More than 2,000 people did that. Very, very cool stuff. So now the next step is that the CPUC is going to issue a final revised proposal sometime in August. That could change, but that's what we think they're going to do. And we're going to evaluate their proposal based on a few things. One, no solar tax. Two is make sure that the net metering credit is good enough so that solar still pencils out as a good investment for middle and working class people. We want to maintain the traditional 20 years of protection for existing solar users. And then we want to do a bunch of things to make solar more equitable for working class people, low income people. So right now, if you're low income and you have solar, you actually don't get the full credit that other people get for your extra energy. That's absurd. You're penalizing people just because you're poor. That's literally a policy of the CPUC. We want to end that so that they get the full credit just like everybody else. And then we want to strengthen the policies that allow renters to get the benefits of rooftop solar as well. Your voices totally matter. I want to remind you that if the CPUC seems like a depressing bureaucracy where you don't have any kind of impact, just remember that it all comes down to the governor. Remember, all it took was a few words from him in January to totally upset the apple cart. And it would just take a few more from him today to change the game. He's the one that's accountable. He's the one that appoints these people. So we're going to keep our eye on the CPUC, but we should always, first and foremost, keep our eye on the governor. And then we just have to keep doing things, calling, writing, calling into the CPUC, testifying before the CPUC, lather, rinse, repeat. We should just not give up because that's what the utilities want us to do. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then we can do questions, whatever you would like to do.
I just got my true up bill a few days ago. I've had solar on my mobile home since 2016, I believe is when I went live. And my true up was $138 roughly for the year. And I don't understand why SDG&E changed the month of my true up, because it used to be January, and then all of a sudden they told me it was going to be in June. And
Yeah.
so I just, got the June notice of what the true up was.
Yeah. Let me see if I can quickly troubleshoot this here. And then if we can't, Leslie, then I invite you to shoot me an email and then let's talk offline and figure it out. But one quick question is, did you recently opt into a local community choice aggregator? A lot of the local governments,
Yes.
you did.
Yes.
That's why. I suspect that's why, because their true up period is different than the utilities. And so sometimes when you opt in, your true up will shift.
Ah, okay, thank you.
You bet.
I have a question. Is Newsom able to, he appoints the CPUC members, is he able to fire them?
I don't know. I doubt he would. I think the legislature confirms these people. So I suspect the power is in the hands of the legislature. He could suggest to the legislature to remove them. But I suspect that they are protected because, from political meddling. I mean, that's probably what it's about. So there has to be some vote of the legislature. I think more to your point, though, is the power that governors have over appointees is soft power. It's not like he can literally tell them what to do. But everybody in Sacramento politics knows that the CPUC doesn't do anything that's like big that the public is paying attention to. They don't do anything until they have heard from the governor. So one way or another, his hand is on this thing, and his hand will be on this thing. And it's possible that his hand was not on the December proposal, or his advisors were telling him, don't worry about it, Governor, we got this taken care of. But as soon as it blew up, he had something to say. Now he's been totally silent. So we really are in a state of purgatory at the moment. And the governor's official communications to people, if you've written the governor, you might have gotten a canned response back that says, this is really in the hands of the CPUC. They always say that, but he's totally paying attention to this thing. And whatever they come out with in August or September or what have you, you can be darn well sure that it has his approval. We're giving him the benefit of the doubt right now, and we should. We want him to be a hero. He's stood up for climate change. This is a chance for him to make good on that. As soon as the CPUC comes out with their proposal, that's his hand. And we'll need to hold him accountable for that. And let's hope it's good. But if it's not, we're going to have to push back very hard.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hand up.
That's
Margaret?
me. Hi, Dave. Great presentation. Thank you. I'm here tonight because of a conversation on Facebook where some friends of mine were mocking people that were getting solar panels and solar energy and saying that it was way too expensive and it wasn't environmentally friendly anyway because of all the materials that go into it. It had a large carbon footprint. So I'm wondering if there's a specific, like a one sheet on your website that might have information like answering questions that people have or pushback from ordinary citizens. Like, how do we get more people excited about the idea of solar when they think it's too expensive?
Well, there's two things. There's the cost and there's the environmental impact. So let's maybe just address each of these in brief. So first up on the cost, this is a consumer decision, and getting solar, there's different ways you can get solar, and it kind of depends on what your situation is. If you're paying for it up front, right, either in cash or you're taking out like a loan, like we refinanced our mortgage and took some money out of our equity and used that to pay for the solar. So it's sort of like a low interest loan. It's not cheap. Like our system was like over $20,000, and so it's certainly true. That's not like, I think for most people, you just go like, that's a lot of money. You're making an investment. In California, you will recoup that investment within like 6 to 8 years, but it's still an investment. And so it's expensive if you look at it, from the upfront cost. You're going to save money hand over fist once you've recouped your investment. And that's the whole name of the game. So it's just all about how you look at it. So that's if you pay for it up front. That said, you can get solar today without paying any money up front. It's called a power purchasing agreement. And it's a financing arrangement where the solar company will own and operate the solar system on your roof. They will sell you the power. Then you may go, well, how is that any different than a utility? It's not, except one big difference is that typically these power purchasing agreements, you're buying the power from the solar company at a lower rate than the electricity you would buy from the utility, and it's fixed over a 20-year period. So this way of getting solar, no money down, the long-term financial benefits aren't as much as if you own the system. But for people that don't have any cash to be able to put up front, what they have is a roof, it's an amazing way to get the savings of solar. Well, that costs you no money up front. So there are some, and this is why solar is growing and working in middle-class neighborhoods. Now, that said, I don't sell people solar. What I want people to do is get themselves informed and make a good decision about as a consumer. It's not going to be for everyone. We waited. The first time I got solar companies to come out and give me bids, we took those bids and then we said, okay, thank you. And then we waited another 2.5 years because it just didn't feel like the right time. And then we did it. And other people, they're going to jump right in because they just feel ready or the deal just seems really good. The Solar Rights Alliance website has if you go to our homepage, solarrights.org, you'll see in the top, there's a button that says Consumer Guide. And that takes you to a list of articles. And one of them is how to shop around for solar and get a good, and find an installer that's right for you. And we have a bunch of tips and a method that you can use to make sure that you're getting on terra firma for what's going to be a fairly big decision. But I would just want to be clear, you don't have to pay for it up front. There are ways where you pay nothing up front, and there's nothing about that that's expensive. It's the opposite. Just briefly on the environmental impact of solar and on batteries, there's a lot that's been written about that. There is an environmental impact of manufacturing solar panels. They use chemicals and materials that are not, that you have to put together. And today's batteries use lithium. Lithium has to get mined. Lithium mining can be a dirty business. These are all totally true things. There's the issue of disposal. And what do you do with them afterward? The industry is stepping up and doing a lot of disposal, but it's not all there yet. So the question is just, I think for people who are concerned about that kind of thing, I think the question you want to ask is those environmental impacts greater than the environmental impact of not moving to renewable energy, given the technology of what we have today? And anyone that has done that work, whether it's the Sierra Club or Environment California, or the groups that do this kind of research, that the environmental impact of not moving to renewable energy with the technology that we have today, warts and all, will be far more catastrophic than the environmental impact we have that goes into manufacturing these items. And so, like everything, it is an imperfect world. And what we know is climate change is a really big and existential threat. And so we have to kind of accept that for what it is, while also pushing, companies and manufacturers to, try to figure out how to make this stuff as environmentally benign as possible and to reduce, reuse, recycle, and all those things. And that's the best way to think about it.
Can I have a quick follow-up question? Do the recouping costs include using your battery to charge your electric car? Because I have a friend who uses her solar energy for her car, and she only spends about $8 to $10 on gasoline a month, whereas I spend $90 every time I fill up, like once a week. And so I'm just wondering if that's been factored in.
So so a little tip, if you're in the market for solar and you're interested, one thing I always say is get 3 bids, at least 3 bids. So, get a bunch of installers to come out. Don't click on those Facebook ads. Actually, just pick up the phone and, do your research and all that stuff. And our website gives you tips on that. One of the things you're going to want to know is, what's my return on the investment? Like, how long will it take for this system to pay back? And you might ask them, give me a proposal for a solar only system. Give me a proposal for a solar system with a battery. And they're going to ask you, they're going to want to know things like, they're going to download your utility bill. They're going to look at your electricity usage. They're going to ask you, are you planning on electrifying? Are you planning on getting an electric car? What is your future energy usage going to be?
Right.
And they should be able to answer these questions for you. If they can't, or the answers aren't clear, that's a good sign that may not be the right company for you. It's just like any kind of project. You want to feel like you're getting clear answers. And if someone is treating you like a dummy or they're talking over your head, move on.
Thank you, Dave. Great answer.
Leslie, did you have another question? You're muted.
Unmute. You need to consider what your end goal is going to be in your electrification. So basically, when I bought my solar, they wanted to, sell me 9 panels and walk away. And I said, hey, wait. I said, I want to have air conditioning in my house, and I'm eventually going to have a fully electric kitchen, and I'm going to have an electric car. And so I ended up with 14 panels on my house. And it just about covers my yearly need. But I have a fully electric car, and I drive maybe 50 miles a week. Like I said earlier, that my true up was $138 for the year. And when you figure I'm charging my electric car, that's pretty cheap transportation. The other thing that I'm looking forward on electrification is eventually vehicle to grid will become a thing, and we'll be able to take that solar and charge our batteries in our electric vehicles. And then later on, in the day or during the peak times of power, you'll be able to run your household electricity off of the battery in your car. And that's one item that has kept me from buying, separate battery backup, is I'm thinking what the next electric car will be. The other thing that I wanted to say is that there's an application called Climate Action Now that you can download for your phone. And the application has been written by a climate reality leader, and he puts together scripts that everybody can chime in on and send emails, etc., to people like Alice Reynolds, who's at the cpuc.ca.gov. And I wrote her an email several weeks ago, and my email to her says, "Congratulations on your new position as the president of the CPUC. We are counting on you to guide the PUC to create a solution to the current NIM crisis. The proposal from the utilities will slow adoption of rooftop solar and storage. And as Senator Feinstein wrote in her letter to you, it is concerning and may impact the state's conservation goals as we address climate change. Every rooftop solar with solar panels helps curb the climate crisis. Thank you." And then I signed it off and sent it off. And so basically, I recovered this letter that I wrote within that Climate Action Now app just by going to community and searching CPUC. And so my previous email was there and retrievable. I hope that helps. I just have completed, my electrification process on the house within the last couple of weeks, and finished up with an induction range and new microwave in my kitchen. And when you're doing your solar, if you're going to purchase solar and have the electricians, etc., they're doing the install, you want to think ahead about all of the places where you're going to need 240 volt plugs, like your electric dryer. You're going to need 240 volts if you're going to put in a heat pump with air conditioning, etc., etc. And
Leslie, let me go to another question, please. I got
okay.
other hands up. Tim, good to see you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Dave Rosenfeld, thank you so much. I think this is a very nice, concise presentation, and I hope maybe you would allow me to engage you offline because I have a lot of questions and I've paid some attention to this. But I wanted to just mention our own experience here in Del Mar. We don't really have an initiative, as I understand, but we did put rooftop solar about a year ago. And we had 2 hybrids, and my wife replaced hers with a electric car. And half the solar panels of 23 served the house and half charged the car. And the calculation for the gas, even with the hybrid, was $2,500 a year. So with the federal subsidies, in the long term, as you were saying, you essentially the money goes into paying for the solar and not for gasoline. And I think that so the 2 issues of economics and climate change, I think, are the most important for this, or what I've seen. Now, in terms of the economics, I think the comments, I think it was Margaret, if something's simple, it's clear the economics are there for almost everybody with some option. And as an aside comment about the politics, I don't know why anybody's surprised that the governor of California or the state legislator is blocking what the citizens want again. And I am I've seen a lot of politics over times. Why we assume that the politics is going to fix this problem and are always looking to the government, and the government is promising and it never happens. So, and as I understand, we're in a little bit of a bind, because if you criticize the governor, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. But the governor took a vacation to Austria, I believe, during the climate summit with his family. He went skiing, was the reports in the paper. And so I look at what people do, and that's the one comment about this. The second thing I just want to quickly mention, and if I just make one more comment, I've spent a lot of time, a lot of the pollution is coming up across the Mexican border, and they're working on the Otay Mesa stations to allow better transportation, less idling and things like that. Is there any incentives to help Mexicans drive electric cars, to give an incentive crossing the border in terms of any kind of fees or things like that, particularly for commercial? Thanks for letting me say those things.
Yeah, let's definitely continue offline, and I put my email in the chat for anyone that wants to, contact. Just a little vignette, just to pivot off that, and then we can, move on to other questions. Is I was in Mexico in December with my family. A dear friend of ours did a career change and now works for the State Department and was stationed in Mexico City. And we were like, we gotta make this happen. And I was chatting with one of our taxi drivers one day, and I was just asking him about what he thought of the president of Mexico and just, person on the street politics. And it kind of goes back to Phyllis, the woman from San Diego who I was telling you about. He starts talking about how the president of Mexico is in the pocket of the utilities, and he's trying to basically, stop people from putting solar panels on their rooftop so that the utilities can control all of the energy. And I was, again, just kind of floored at just how the thing, and so just the reason why I bring that up is both just, I'm always astonished at how people on the street understand this so well, with even whether they have solar or not. It's an aspirational thing for everybody. But also, just to your point about politics, people who know me well know that I'm, that kind of circle of like where you fit on the circle. And, if you go around the circle enough, you meet. Like, I have no idea what my politics are anymore after years of just being an environmental activist. But one thing I know is that this technology is amazing and people are already voting by getting it. And what's going on here is you have a entrenched, dying oligarchic system that is trying to use all of its leverage and influence to block people from getting it before it jumps out of the bag completely and it's unstoppable. At this point, you couldn't imagine the owners of horses stopping the car. But once upon a time, the people that ran the horse stables thought that they could stop the car, and so forth with the telephone companies and so forth with the radio people. And that's where we are today. And so unfortunately, I personally don't really like doing politics very much. I think most people don't. There's nothing fun about it for the most part. We have to do it because otherwise our government is going to just take it away from us. And so to me, it's a reluctant call to action at best. And what I would love is that we can succeed in getting the utility off our backs so that we can go back to spending time with our families and our community and doing all in a church and synagogues, so that we can go back and, and same thing with all the other things you're trying to do to fight climate change. So that's just neither here nor there, but just a word on that. Yeah, for what it's worth.
You probably already said it already, Dave. I was going to comment that we've heard many times people try to say how solar has an environmental footprint. Well, the existing system has a huge environmental footprint and is very expensive.
Yeah.
And so they try to find these little things to make excuses. But you're right. It's like cars replacing the automobiles replacing the horse. And what happened here in Fallbrook around the year 1900 was that the horse stables became car garages because it was the only way they could make money.
The world changes, and sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. It's a gray world. Nothing is black and white. So the best thing you have to do is good. What's the greatest good for the greatest number of people over the longest period of time? And that's the best we can do. And, I'm convinced that this stuff, checks an awful lot of boxes in that way. And that's kind of, I think it's the only way you can make a decision these days, because otherwise you just get paralyzed because there's so much information.
Okay. I don't know how to get a hand up there. It's not, I've got a hand showing, but it's not lighting up like everybody else's did.
Just go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you for the presentation, David. It was very informative. I want to say something. Earlier in the presentation, you were explaining how net metering works, and you said that if you're producing more than you're using, it goes to your neighbor, and they charge your neighbor for it, and then they credit you that amount. That's not quite accurate. It goes to your neighbor, and they charge your neighbor for it for sure, but they don't credit you that amount. I overproduce every year, and they credit me at the wholesale level what they would actually pay for the electricity, which in my case was just under 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So, when they're charging 20 or 30 cents a kilowatt hour, normally that what they credit you is way less, which I don't mind, because I installed my system based on future needs, not current needs. So I sized it appropriately, but I've over generated for the last year and a half, and I'll receive a credit, but it won't be nearly what they are selling that electricity for, which is kind of surprising that they're down on rooftop solar, because they make a lot of money off of people. That's wholesale, and they're charging retail for it. We're a profit center for them.
So you are correct.
Another.
Oh, sorry. Let me just on that point, Glenn, you are correct, and I am correct. Let me just tell you why.
Okay.
So all of this misunderstanding is rooted in the fact that the utility bills are really, really difficult to read. And it's also rooted in kind of the way the true up system works. And for those who aren't familiar with true up, you don't actually pay the utility anything when you have solar until the anniversary of the day that your solar system was turned on by the utility. That's your true up date. And
Right.
what the utility does at that point is says, how many credits do you have left in the kitty, essentially? And then they cash you out at not the retail rate, but the wholesale rate, which is about 4 or 5 cents. And that's what you're referring to. And that's absolutely true. But the part that you don't see, which is weird that you don't see it, because you would think that they would want you to see it, because it would help make their case, is that any other time of the year except for true up, if you are producing more energy, solar energy, than you are using, you are getting credited at the retail rate, which is an average of 25 cents a kilowatt hour. And sometimes obviously it's a lot higher than that, or lower. And that goes and that just immediately goes and offsets any electricity that you then buy when the sun is not shining in the evening. But when you get your month-to-month statements, it's not immediately clear how that works. So oftentimes the only thing you see is the bottom line, where you are at the end of the year. But make no mistake about it, every other time of the year, except for true up, your extra energy is getting credited right now at the retail rate, minus just a couple of cents to pay for poles and wires and just kind of things like that. And if that goes down to 5 cents like it does at true up, the whole thing gets destroyed. The market will collapse. And that's why you're right.
Okay,
And also I'm right.
okay.
And it's just difficult. This is a very, very common thing. Like they almost make it like they want people to misunderstand that. And I don't quite understand why, but there's a lot of things I don't understand about them.
Yeah, no, okay, I see what you're saying. My bill, I don't know if it's gonna show up right there. Probably not gonna.
That's kind of an eye test, Glenn.
All month long, I mean, all year long, they're crediting me, and I built up $1,023 in credit, and they're gonna send me a check for, I don't know, $80 or something when the time comes that's gonna pay for that $1,000 credit. So I know what you're saying. You're right. It offsets it. What they normally would charge me, I'm not having to pay. Then I wanted to make a comment about what Leslie Gomez said. I believe it was Leslie. She's a wise woman. The least efficient part so far of these solar systems is the battery. And a much more economical way to do that is if you can get it in a car, and if it has, eventually will have a vehicle to grid. She mentioned that, and it's a wise way to do it if you can do it. Now the tax credit will be different, of course, but you know, I priced batteries sometime back for homes, and they're extremely expensive. A 10 kilowatt battery, I don't remember what it was, but 10 kilowatt battery for a house is way more than a 10 kilowatt extra battery in your car. So just want to make that comment for clarity.
Right. So it
Thank
all
you.
just goes
That's it.
back to, this is every individual consumer will have to make a different decision. You want to use good methods like you would with anything, and our website can help you, and there's a lot of other stuff out there that can do that. Battery storage is like, today battery prices are where solar panel prices were at like 2005. The price is dropping, but it's not quite at the point where solar panels are at. People oftentimes get batteries for other reasons than just a return on investment. People are very concerned about blackouts, obviously, and that's that's part of it. Other people, they just have a longer time frame, and then others are just waiting, and they're either waiting for the standalone batteries to become cheaper. Others are waiting for the car to become the battery, and it's a very robust time right now, and it's kind of cool. And this is what we're talking about, how we're sort of midstream through a disruption, and we're watching it happen before our very eyes. And you all who are in the middle of making those choices are part of all of that.
Yeah, and your description of this industry can be applied to the fossil fuel industry with electric cars. They're doing the same thing.
Indeed.
Trying to mislead people, trying to not get them to. And I'm going to plug this company one more time. I'm not going to do it a long shot, but you guys, probably so. It's backwards on mine. Driven by the Sun, that's the Aptera. That's the car that I've got on order. Okay, thank you again, Dave, for your presentation.
Terry?
All right, so with that, we are at the bottom of the half hour here. And Dave, thank you so much. I think you can tell by the questions we got some good information out of this. So we really appreciate you presenting to us, but then all the work you're doing as well. So on behalf of all of us, I know many of us already have solar panels and appreciate not having a lot of those fees being added on. And those of us that I know are planning on getting them, that, like you said, that's what would price us out of the market. So again, appreciate all of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Back at
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you for everything you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.